I played in the original Canada Cup like a half a century ago, and it was the great thing about it for the players is you put on a sweater that has your country's logo on it, and all of a sudden there's a gleam in your eye. It really is kind of special. It was different when I played for Team USA because we had about I'm going to guess like 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks of training camp. These guys get 2 practices and they get thrown together. It doesn't diminish the feeling that each player has playing for your country, but there's something extraordinary about how you feel when you put the jersey on and you're playing against another nation. It's just for whatever reason it's particularly exhilarating.
Mike, we've been spending the last, I would say, a couple weeks dissecting everything that Marchand does or doesn't do on and off the ice. Do you think that there is any chance that he is going to be out of Boston by March 7th, the trade deadline?
I think that it should be explored. I mean, I think they have to take a realistic look at where they are, which is out of the playoffs right now, although they're, just fractionally out. They could make it back in. I don't think there's a realistic expectation of advancement deep into the playoff situation. It's just not going to happen. You've seen the way they've blown leads, and their defenses. They should be a defense first organization because they don't have enough offensive firepower to try it the other way, and that's where their goal should be for going forward. But it doesn't look like they've got it all together, and you've got to certainly point to the personnel first, and then you have to start thinking about who's doing the coaching and who's disciplining who in certain situations. But they don't have it figured out. So to get back to your question, I think it has to be explored, and I think it has to be done with some level of diplomacy. If they're going to explore it, they have to discuss it with Marchand, and if he says no, then they have a tough call. But there are a lot of teams that have kept players well past their prime because of previous accomplishments with the team, and they get nothing for them at the end when I think 2 things could be accomplished. The player could get a chance to win another Stanley Cup, maybe extend his career, and you get an asset that will help you in the future. But it seems to be something that a lot of teams are reluctant to try, and I don't think they should be.
But for this team, he's the second best with points this season. Like, how are they going to fill that void if they send him back?
No, they're not going to fill the void. What they're going to do is they're going to gamble on the future. They're going to gamble to this guy who's such a competitor, and a guy that I have told you I think is the premium left wing of all time in the Bruins organization, and that says something. But the organization has to face obstacles that the organization faces, not just be sentimental about the fact that Brad Marchand has been a great player here. And they could do him a favor. They could extend his career potentially, and they could do something that they desperately need to do, which is gather assets going forward to make their team a better team and a competitive team and a team that could win a Stanley Cup, because they're not composed right now to be in that position.
Mike, how hard is it for those conversations when you had them and you were at the Islanders and the owner would be saying, hey, we'd be better off with one series in the home gate in terms of the financial stability of the club, whereas you're looking at 3 to 4 years down the road. How do you balance that, and how real are those kind of conversations? Do those actually happen? Like, is Don Sweeney, hypothetically speaking now with the Jacobs, about what their plans are at the deadline and what they have to get to?
I would think that he would be talking to them. Yeah, I think that he and Cam would have to be facing some reality here that their jobs are maybe in jeopardy. I don't know the relationship between Charlie Jacobs, who's running the show now here, but I know that in times when I was a manager, that the ownership got overly involved, and that was a giant pain in the ass. But I don't think that's happening here. But I do think there's an obligation for the manager, the president in this case, to continually be in contact with ownership, because they're in choppy waters right now, and you want to be able to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, and give people that sign the paycheck a reason to continue to sign it for you. So I think there's got to be, at this point, there has to be fairly constant communication between those three guys.
The rebuild or the retool, however Cam referred to it, is how long does that take? And it's without significant, high draft picks. It's got to be a while. There's no answer to that question because you don't know how you're going to how things are going to work out with these draft picks. But you've got to take the chance. I mean, you can't throw all your chips into a free agent basket. It's in this sport, especially, even though the cap is going up, there's only so much you can spend in free agency. And they went out and spent in free agency, and they made mistakes this past offseason. So, but the better way to do it, I think, right now is to find ways to gather draft collateral and start putting the pressure on your scouts to look at things in a hard way and to fill some spots. And their spots need to be filled are certainly in the top two center positions. And that's what it's going to be, a gamble. The whole thing is a gamble. It's a crapshoot. Trying to draft kids at 18 and figure out exactly what they're going to be like at 25 is nobody's perfect at that game, but you've got to play it.
Mike, when they get back, they'll have about 2 weeks before the actual trade deadline. Has their mind kind of been made up in the direction that they want to go front office wise, or will the 2 weeks play a major factor in the direction that they want to go into?
You're talking about ownership,
yes,
wanting to go. Yeah, I would think that they would. I mean, 2 weeks is a long 2 weeks heading into the deadline. Mm-hmm. I think how management handles this is, yes, going to be impactful on how they think about the future, how ownership thinks about the future. Because, I mean, does anybody on this radio station think that this team is going to go past the first round of the NHL playoffs?
No.
I don't think so. And so if we're thinking this, and they have to be thinking that at this point, this is not 2 years ago when they were brilliant for most of the season. So you have to then take advantage of an opportunity to make things happen. By the way, did you see Kevin Dupont's? And I thought this was a really interesting idea. He tried to declare that there should be a trade week, like during the season. I don't know if it's a week or 2 weeks, but it would be such a great idea. First of all, it'd be great for the players. They don't have to sit around every day worrying about when the team's playing well, whether they're going to be traded or not. Yeah. It'd be a 2 week window, and that would cause people to have a flurry of conversations around the league, and then they could finish the season. I thought it was a really interesting idea.
Yeah. So that's it. Only 2 weeks.
2 weeks, and then the off season, of course, you could make deals. But I thought it was, would sort of, I don't know, compress the pressure and make sure that everybody was, feeling good about themselves after the deadline was over. But anyway, this deadline comes up, and I would think that there will be activity here. And if there's not activity, and if I were the owner of the team, I would be disappointed. I think they need to realize the position they're at. I think ownership also has to recognize the fact that these two guys, Neely and Sweeney, did some really interesting things and looked like they were trying to get the team over the finish line for a championship. And sadly and surprisingly, it didn't really come close. But I thought, and I think most people thought, the things they did 2 years ago in particular were really good and really savvy and looked like they positioned themselves to be, in a Stanley Cup final. But crap happens.
It does, and it will be interesting over the next few weeks, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time. We will talk to you again next Thursday, Mike Milbury.
You got it.
All right, there he is.